Welcome, everybody. We've obviously had a couple of weeks where we were doing workshopping and everyone was preparing to turn in their work. Now that you have turned in your work, these two sessions that are coming up, the one today and the one next week, are the last two official lessons of Conchas y Café, Volume 6, Series number 3. That means that after the next 2 weeks, there'll be a couple of weeks off, and then we'll be celebrating the release of the new zine. I'll be posting up in the Google Classroom an assignment, quote unquote, for you guys to suggest the title name for the next Conchas y Café zine. Just remember, obviously, that we're talking about unity as the overall theme, but the title will be up to you guys. And I'll select from your suggested title options once I start working on the zine. To end our current series, just like the last two series before, we'll be actually talking this week a little bit more about publishing and next week as well. The last two times that we covered these types of workshops, I talked about different resources for finding funding, and I believe last time I also covered how to create a business plan and also how to create a project budget if in case you were ever going to apply to a grant or anything like that. But I felt like this time around I wanted to get a little bit more in depth on helping you all maybe understand some of the nuances to applying to grants and also the other types of opportunities that you have as artists, as writers. Obviously, those of you that are interested in publishing and also in being part of the DSTL Arts programs overall, you have access to a lot of information, and you also have the opportunity, if you ever are interested in being part of the mentorship program, which I think I've mentioned before. It is changing, it is evolving over this next year, over the summer. That's mostly what I'll be focusing on. But any questions that you have about publishing or even funding a project, you can always reference the handouts, but you can also obviously reach out to me directly, and I'd be more than happy to give you some guidance. But here for this week, I did create this handout that I'll be posting to Google Classroom later when I upload this video to YouTube. But this handout is basically designed to help give you some things to really think about as you start looking into these different opportunities. The first one is grants. Right? So aquí tienen las becas. And when it comes to grants, there's the ones that most people are familiar with, which are governmental ones, right? The California Arts Council, the LA County Department of Arts and Culture, the City of LA has their Department of Cultural Affairs. They provide grants to individual artists for doing all sorts of different kinds of projects. The California Arts Council has their certain restrictions, usually they're based on geography. The work has to be done in the state of California. Usually you can't do traveling outside of the state of California. A lot of times governmental grants will also not fund projects that have a political association to them, like a very direct political association or a religious association to them. Private foundations, those will sometimes fund projects that do have more of a political leaning or more of a religious leaning, but again, that's not always universal. So you really want to make sure that you're looking at the priorities of the funder. Like it says here, some funders have key focus areas. So they might be things like education or health and wellness or mental health. It might be something that's more specific to, say, an ethnic group or even to just one area of the city or of the state. So those are things that you really, really need to make sure that you understand before you start applying to these grants. The nice thing about grants, though, is that they most of the time will have a very clear selection method. It's usually going to be some sort of rubric that is posted to their website along with all of the other materials that you would need to understand how to apply to the grant. Y sobre todo es importante leer. You always have to read what you're essentially getting into when you're applying for a grant. The thing about grants is that they might only cover direct expenses, right? So nothing administrative like insurance or rent or even utilities. Those types of administrative expenses a lot of times are things that you have to find matching funds for, or you have to find some other way of raising money to cover that. Unless if it's like, say, insurance, like one-time insurance that you're doing for just the one event or for just the one activity that is part of your project. But if we're talking about, like, say, writing a book, right, and you get a grant that helps you write your book, an administrative expense could be something like paying for, legal fees if you want to work with a lawyer to make sure that you get licenses to use other people's work as part of your book. Or if you're doing like I don't know, maybe like a website that you're building that's going to help support the sale of your book. Those are two different kinds of projects that the grant might not cover. So do keep that in mind. Also, all grants have deadlines, right? And it's not just a deadline for when you submit, but it's also going to be a specific time frame in which you can actually execute your project. They normally will want like a beginning and an end to a grant, project, to something that they fund. So depending on the kind of grant that you're applying to, the kind of project that you're proposing, it should be something that you can complete within, whatever the time frame is. Some grants are 3-month grants. Some grants I've seen are just for 1 month. In 1 month you have to complete your full project. So you have to keep that in mind as you're developing your projects, as you're pitching them to the funder. And the same goes for reporting your outcome, right? Everything that is grant funded is almost always going to require some sort of report at the end, whether that's how many people you served, or how much money was spent in X category, or if you published something that needs to be also reported. The nice thing about most grants is that the artist will own the copyright almost all of the time. If you get a grant to complete a project, it'll be your project. It'll be something that you are going to forever own, but the grantor might license the work to reproduce it, or you may be giving them permission to use it in their own marketing materials to say, hey, this is the kind of project that we fund, so consider applying to us. Does anybody have any questions so far about that, about a grant? I know Ani last week was asking about grants and that kind of thing. I covered a little bit of what I just said then, but Kathy, did you raise your hand?
I did, thank you. Do you know if you have to be self-registered as an LLC or a nonprofit to be able to get the grants?
That is a great question. In some cases, grants are limited to only nonprofits. So even if you are working, as an independent artist and you have a project that you want to get funding for, it may be necessary for you to get fiscal sponsorship by a nonprofit, or simply work directly with a nonprofit to do the program you want to do. So do keep that in mind. But there are grants that are also for individual artists. And that type of grant, it's usually considered like a fellowship, or it could be an artist grant. And they'll let you know whether or not you have to be incorporated as a business owner. Now, normally, depending on how much money you're bringing in through grants, you don't have to actually incorporate. You don't have to file or register yourself as a business owner. But there's a lot of benefits to actually registering yourself as a business owner, because that means that you get access to other services through the county that you live in or the city that you live in. You know, as an artist, you might be able to, I don't know, like pitch your services to the city for, say, like creative writing, you know, or editing services, you know, which might be a service that you provide as a writer. If you're a graphic designer or a photographer, you know, there's always the opportunity to do graphic design work or photography for the county. Like right now, for example, the county, LA County, has what they call a request for qualifications, where they've opened up their qualified pool of artists. So, you know, they are basically saying, send us your resume, send us samples of your artwork, and if you qualify based on our criteria, we'll add you to a list of vendors that we will then hire at some point, you know, if you fulfill the requirements or the basic qualifications. And that's something that you can do as an actual business owner. It means you have to have you know, a vendor ID. It means you have to have a business license. You know, you don't have to incorporate. You could be a sole proprietor, but you know, there are benefits to incorporating as an LLC, which is a limited liability corporation, or as a there's a lot of other ways in which you can incorporate. But all of that stuff becomes, you know, legal things, and it all relates to how you're insured. And you know, if you have questions about that, I very strongly recommend that you consider going to your small business administration office, whether that be, you know, a local community-based one or even the library. Pretty much all libraries have information about how to incorporate a business as well. I know the LA Public Library has that for sure. And they even do workshops for free, so even better. A very good question, Kathy. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah, no problem. No other questions about grants? All right. So one thing I should mention about most of these ways in which people get funding for projects, they're almost all going to require you to claim the money that you get when you know, file your taxes. And so that's another reason why it might be good for you to incorporate your business, to incorporate your artist business, because, you know, there's certain tax benefits that you get by being incorporated. Although, again, you do not have to be. You can still, you know, be an unincorporated business acting as a sole proprietor. But, you know, learn more about that through the Small Business Administration. The second way in which you can get money for projects is by submitting to different types of prizes or awards. Most of the time, they will require the submission of either a partial or a complete project. So like if it's a book award, you know, and it's your first book ever, there's some publishers that will accept a whole manuscript and they'll judge it and then, you know, offer you either an award, which could be funding, or it could be, you know, an actual book deal. The same goes for, like, say, photography contests. You know, there's a lot out there that you can submit, you know, for a small fee, sometimes a large fee, a certain number of photos that they'll then print for you and provide like a workshop, you know, or a sort of meet and greet thing with a famous photographer. You know, there's a lot of different ways in which awards are given. But do keep that in mind, right? Some of them might require submission fees. So, you know, if submission fees are a barrier, you know, there's always the opportunity to submit to ones that don't have submission fees. You know, that's also an option. And sometimes those are grant funded, and so they'll offer you a smaller prize, or they might offer you, you know, something that they're given by their sponsors for the prize winners. The one thing about awards, though, is that selection, unlike in a grant where it's defined by a rubric, selection for an award is going to depend largely on people and their preferences. So if it's an editorial, board that is selecting, if their preference is, a certain style of artwork, then they'll probably, give the award to that particular person. Same for an artistic one. So if you're doing visual art, you want to keep those things in mind. That's why it's good to do a little bit of research on who the judges are. And if you think that those judges might enjoy your work based on the type of work that they write or that they create, then it might be worth your while to submit artwork to be judged in a contest. Again, because of the potential of there being a submission fee, the prize amount is going to be really, really. They vary widely. I've won awards where it was $100 cash prize. I've also won awards where it was just a medal. I've never at this point yet won an award that was like a large amount of funding to maybe pay for the printing of a book or something like that, but there are some out there. With awards and contests, the artist almost always continues to own the copyright, but again, they might license your work for reproduction, right? So if it's like a poetry award, like the ones that I've won in the past, they'll give me the award, they'll give me the cash, and then they'll say, hey, we also want to publish your work. So give us a license, to give us your permission to print your work in our book, in our anthology that collects the work of other artists that were also selected to be in the book. So, the first two, again, you hold on to the copyright. You continue to be the owner of your work. That's not always the case with some of these ways of getting funding for your projects. The next one would be artist residencies and fellowships. Some of these are governmental or they might be through private foundations. Some artist residencies are also through like small nonprofits, like DSTL Arts. I do offer an artist residency. But a lot of the ones that are going to be available to you as individual artists are more than likely going to be either through a government body or a private foundation or a nonprofit that is a local one. At least the type that pay you. There's always the artist residencies, quote unquote, where you pay them to give you space to go do work. That's usually more in the like artist retreat sort of genre of an artist residency. But just like with a contest, it might require that you submit either a partial project, so something that you've already started, or it might require you to submit a proposal, something that you hope to complete or hope to start while you're an artist resident. Some of them also require submission fees, so do keep that in mind. The governmental ones almost rarely require you to pay them to look at your application. Like there's one with the National Park Service, and they're like 2 to 3 weeks long with the national parks. And you can, get a space where they'll give you an office and a small stipend. But you don't pay anything to submit to them. You have to cover the cost of you going there, to the park, and you might have to cover the cost of a couple of meals, but they sometimes balance it out with helping you in other areas. This also sometimes will depend, if you're selected, it'll depend on the art editorial board or the artistic board, that is the selection committee. But sometimes it's also based on a rubric. So that one, again, you just really want to make sure that you read the requirements for applying to this artist residency or a fellowship. Similar to a grant, most fellowships and artist residencies are time sensitive. So, you have to get there by a certain amount of time. Sometimes the residency only runs for a certain amount of weeks in the month of July, for example. And that's it. So you have to sort of adjust your schedule to meet the residency requirements. And a lot of times they'll also ask for a sort of report that you do at the very end. Another thing to keep in mind is that most artist residencies are not designed for the completion of a full project. So it's possible that you might complete a project, but most of the time they understand that you're going to just simply start something. You're not really there to polish a manuscript that you're going to then publish through them. That's usually not how it works. So in this case, you probably don't have to worry about copyrights or licenses. They might ask you to take a couple of pictures for their social media and, maybe share a little bit of the work that you did during your time as an artist resident. But, that all depends on the program that you're doing your residency through. Are there any questions about artist residencies or awards that maybe I didn't cover that popped up in your mind? All right. Well, let's keep it rolling. Now, these next two are going to be really probably the main ways in which most independent working artists, supplement their income. So you'll be more than likely, as an artist, working to get a grant while also submitting to awards and contests, while trying to do an artist residency or applying to various artist residencies throughout the year. But these right here, commissions and donations and sales, are the two ways in which you'll more than likely be bringing in money on a regular basis to help pay for some of the costs of applying to awards and that kind of thing. Commissions can be governmental. They can also be through private foundations and also through private collectors. So keep that in mind. Each one is going to have a different way of approaching a commission. For example, right now, I know that the LA County Department of Arts and Culture, that's a governmental body, they are taking requests for qualifications so that they can then commission an artist to do an art installation at a few different places at new county buildings that are coming up. Private foundations might include a private library or a private museum that is looking to expand their collection, through a particular way of working with their foundation. A private collector is basically a person that collects art, and they might commission you. And those kinds of commissions are, most of these, they'll be contracted labor. So you'll be contracted to complete a project within a particular budget that the contractor, the person contracting you, provides you. That's why it's really important that you upfront agree to whatever artist fees and the payment terms will be for this commission. So if you know that you're going to charge $250 an hour for a project, and they're commissioning you for a project that has a budget of, say, $3,000, you want to break that down to how much time it'll actually take you to complete the project, while also budgeting in, the cost of supplies. That's the one thing about commissions, is that a lot of times, you have to pay up front for the supplies, and then you get reimbursed when you actually bill them. So those are things that you want to agree upon at the beginning. Also, for taxes, artist services, normally if it's a service that you provide, doesn't require you to collect sales tax. Normally, it depends on the type of service. There's certain services that do. But the income that you generate from a commission is something that will be taxed. It's still part of the income tax system. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. Just like with a grant, there's certain administrative expenses. Well, there's certain administrative expenses that you need to consider whether or not you're incorporated as a business. Even as a sole proprietor that is unincorporated, you still have to claim whatever funding you get from a commission as part of your income. The thing about commissions is that almost always the artist will continue to own the copyright, but it really depends on the way in which they hire you, which I'll get into a little bit later. But you, again, might be able to license your work for reproduction, even though you might have turned in the original artwork to, like, say, a museum or a private collector. The same goes with the artwork that is commissioned by a governmental body. If it's like, say, a painting or a mural, or a zine, they might own the copyright on the product that is published, through, like, say, the county, but you still own the copyright of the actual original writing. So the original content is still yours, but the product that is published, that's licensed, that's what another person might own the copyright on. I'll kind of explain that a little bit more when I get to the next page. But one thing to remember is that commissions might also limit your reproduction ability. So it may mean that, like, a private collector might not want to see their private commissioned work of art reproduced in a print or reproduced on a t-shirt or on a tote bag, so they might say, I'll commission you to do this, but, just promise me that you'll never devalue, quote unquote, the worth of my original piece by creating reproductions of it. So that is something to keep in mind. The next one is the donations and sales, right? So donations, if you're incorporated as a nonprofit, right? So if you went to the extent of starting your own nonprofit, whether it be a 501c3 or 501c4, there's different types of nonprofits out there. But if it's officially classified as a nonprofit, then the donation is not taxable income. It's just something that you report to the IRS, and the person that donates to you can say on their taxes that they get a credit because they donated to a nonprofit. But otherwise, you still have to claim it as income. So you will have to pay income taxes on anything that is donated to you. Anything of cash value, I should say. The sale of merchandise does require you to collect and also to pay sales tax. So everybody pays taxes in one form or another. And if you're, selling something through, like, your web store, you should be collecting sales tax and then setting aside that sales tax that you collected from the person buying your work, so that way at the end of the year or every quarter, you're sending your taxes to the whatever state body collects taxes. Here in the state of California, it's the franchise tax board, and then there's a separate entity within that you actually pay sales taxes to. Also, if you're collecting donations through platforms like Patreon or GoFundMe or Indiegogo, Kickstarter, any of those crowdfunding sites, they do allow you for incentivizing the giving, right? So that means that if a person donates at a certain level, you can set it up so that they get, like, a free print, or they get, a personalized poem, something like that. When you set it up that way, remember, again, you still have to pay income taxes on that donation, but you also need to take into account how much it's going to cost you in terms of your time and your supplies to fulfill the incentive. Like when I do a personalized poem on my typewriter, it costs me pennies to pay for the ink on the typewriter and also for the index card that I use in the typewriter. But it's about $500 at least for me to do regular maintenance on my typewriter. And then, I charge a certain amount of money for my own individual artist fees. So, I try to incorporate that into the cost overall of the service. Doesn't mean it has to be super expensive. I still charge only $5. But, $5 for 15 minutes of my time, it does add up. And it helps cover the cost of all of those administrative things that I have to cover as an artist. So do keep that in mind if you're setting up a Patreon where you're providing, special access or incentives for people to give money to your particular cause or your project. So, any questions so far? Hope I'm not boring you guys. Everybody's so quiet today. All right.
We're taking notes.
I'm glad. Either way, these handouts will be uploaded once I upload this video to YouTube too. So, you guys that have access to Google Classroom will be able to download these notes later. Or I'm sorry, these handouts later. So, like I was saying, these are the ways in which you can get funding for your art, right? And commissions and sales, donations, commissions especially can get a little bit tricky, especially because you want to start to think about contracts. What are the ways in which you still control your artwork where you still are the owner of your project? So this next one gives you at least my understanding of how some of these contracting documents work. First, we're going to start off with this side, though, work for hire contracting. Work for hire is basically a way of saying, that anything that you create while you are hired to do the job, it can fall under one of two categories. The first category, the first way of getting contracted to do work is to just simply be hired by an employer, which makes you a creative employee. As a creative employee, the employee of say like a graphic design firm, you're hired by them as an employee. And then you get all of the benefits of being an employee. You get a set wage, it might be a salary, it might be an hourly wage, that's something that you and the employer will settle on. But then you might also get things like health benefits. You might get unemployment benefits if you are laid off. There's other benefits to being hired on as an employee, which includes also income taxes, right? So the income taxes are automatically taken out of your paycheck and sent to the IRS and to the state where you live on your behalf. So you don't have to worry about, keeping track of your expenses and things like that as a business owner. Unless if you're doing gigs on the side, in which case you're still a business owner, you're just also paying your income taxes through your job that pays you a regular wage. Now, the one drawback of being an artist and being hired as an employee is that most often, and this isn't always the case, but most often, you'll be signing a contract that says that they can hire you and fire you at will. Same on your side. You can quit at any time that you want. That's what it generally means to be an at-will employee. But most of the time, these contracts, these hiring contracts, will also state somewhere in them that the employer owns the copyright over all of your work. So like, people that are animators, as an example, if you work in animation and you're working at Cartoon Network and the parent company of Cartoon Network are probably going to own whatever it is that you create while you're an employee there. Which isn't a big deal if you're, doing animations, like that somebody else created, right? If you're just simply drawing, a couple of cells or a couple of panels, for a cartoon that you happen to work on, that's artwork that maybe you might want to keep, but ultimately they own it and it's not your own original artwork. So it might not be that big of a deal. It might be more of a big deal though if you're working as, say, like a photographer, and you're working for, like, say, the LA Times, and you want to use your photography that you do while on the job to create other items, like, say, mugs or, a tote bag with your photograph on it. If your employer owns the copyright over your work, over your photograph, you might not be able to use it again for your own personal benefit. So, and that's not always the case with employers. Some employers will allow you to do that kind of thing, like graphic design firms. Some of them might allow you to still own the copyright of your work. But more often than not, it's not going to be the case. More often than not, if you're hired on as an employee and you're doing work for hire, then you're probably not going to continue to own the copyright on your artwork that you create while you're employed by that employer. The second work for hire type of situation would be you working as an independent contractor. So you're hired as contract labor. That means that your artist fees and payment terms are set by you. They'll ask you, kind of like doing a commission, they'll ask you, what you can do within a budget. You tell them, this is how much I charge for your project. This is how often I expect to be paid. This is how I expect to have supplies covered. Those kinds of things are things that you would actually be setting up in a contract. And, that's ultimately how you might end up getting the gig. The thing about being an independent contractor is that you are a business owner at that point. So you are the one that's responsible for reporting all of your income taxes that would be due to the IRS and also to the state. So, you have to be very, very good at keeping, receipts, logging mileage, setting aside your savings for paying your taxes out of every payment that you receive. All of those things are going to be on you as an independent artist. An artist contract that you develop with the person that's contracting you is going to determine whether or not you own the copyright. So, copyrights may be sold, quote unquote, to the contracting entity within your artist contract when you set it up with them. You can set it up so that they pay you royalties. You can also give them full and complete ownership of the intellectual property. So your artwork no longer becomes your artwork. They own it and they get to choose how and when they use it. So, that's something that might be necessary for a particular kind of contract that you get through a work for hire thing. The alternative to that is that you can always license the artwork for an indefinite amount of time. So you could say 3 months, you could say 1 year. You could say, forever until they no longer want to use it and they sign a statement saying that, all the rights revert back to you. So those are all things that you can do when you're setting up your contracts to work as an independent artist. That's also an opportunity for you to get paid in royalties if that's, something that's possible within the project that they're creating. Or you can get paid all up front and then you say, you don't have to pay me any royalties. That was it. And all the work still comes back to me as the copyright owner, after 5 years, for example. So contracts end up becoming very, very important when you're working as an independent contractor, as an independent artist. Are there any questions about that? And Ani wrote in the chat, and you pay a higher tax rate as a business owner than an employee, and you need to pay your own Social Security. That is true. Because as a business owner, you also have to pay small business taxes. So do keep that in mind. But that being said, taxes that are paid are also deductions that you can claim. If you have a combination of a job where an employer is paying you an annual, salary or whatever, those income taxes that you pay through an employer, you might be able to reduce the income taxes based on your business income and the expenses that you have that you incur as a business owner, so they can kind of balance out. There's a lot of things that you can do, and if you have an accountant that you trust, I recommend you talk to an accountant to help you figure that stuff out. Again, also, if you're really considering being an independent artist, you're going to have to think of yourself as a business owner. So you'll want to also, look at workshops that are offered by a small business administration office. or through the library, or any other kind of business of art workshops that are offered by nonprofits like DSTL Arts. Does anybody have any questions? Anything that is pressing before we look at the way that licensing agreements are sometimes created? All right. Well, let's take a look at that then. So on this side of our handout, we got licensing and publishing agreements or contracts. Now, through the mentorship program and through the artist residency program that DSTL Arts offers, I have created a licensing agreement, which is the same as a publishing contract, that says that people that are publishing their work through DSTL Arts will get paid royalty every quarter, that their book is on sale, that their chapbook is on sale, and also that DSTL Arts will sell it for up to 3 years. That's it. After that, the license expires, unless if you want to renew it, and then all of your artwork goes back to you, in publishable form, right? So you get to publish it again if you want to, as a second edition with another publishing company. So publishing agreements or licensing agreements, they're a document that helps you establish all of the permitted uses of your creative work and for how long. There's different levels of licensing that you can provide. There's the exclusive rights, which means that only the licensing entity can use the licensed artwork in whatever way you agree upon, right? So, an exclusive rights thing is basically cutting you out as the artist, meaning that you can't use that artwork in any way that will break the contract. So, if it's a full license agreement that includes like digital, audio, social media, marketing, all of those licenses, then you really can't do anything other than just say, hey, the artwork is there, and it currently belongs to like Time Warner or whoever. So it means that you can't do merchandise and things like that for the artwork that you created. Most licensing agreements that you would be creating with anyone will probably be a limited use one. So limited use rights means that it limits the use of the artwork, so you get to tell the person that's licensing your artwork how and when they're allowed to use your artwork. And you can also introduce a clause that says that you can use the artwork for your own purposes, for your own self-promotion. If you want to create your own t-shirt with your own writing on it, if that's written into your contract that allows for you to do that, that's something that you can do. So it's basically saying that the licensee is able to use the artwork as long as it fits within the contract, and you can use the artwork as long as it isn't something that's stated in the contract. In this case, you always own the copyright over all your licensed work. So as long as you register your copyright, with the U.S. Copyright Office, or even if you don't get to do that, as the person that creates it, you can essentially prove that you are the owner of your own intellectual property. Although it is really, really good to actually register it with the U.S. Copyright Office. But basically, this document is going to be something that always establishes you as the copyright owner. To help you sort of understand how to create a licensing agreement, hopefully you can see this. I found this template, this limited use contract template, through Freelance Kit and the Freelancers Union online. And so I'll be uploading this handout through the Google Classroom for you all to take a look at. But the Freelancers Union is a really, really good resource for stuff like this. especially if you work as a graphic designer, photographer, videographer. And there's also, writers unions too. So, there's like the freelance copy editors. I don't think it's an actual union, but you can find groups that are a type of union that you can become a part of. Yeah, you'll have to pay dues, but you also get the backup of a union in that way. And so this free resource that they have on their website, it does give you a basic template for a contract that you can modify as you need to be able to get a gig. And going back to this handout, you're able to see it. These are all the different ways in which you can license your artwork. So these are licensing formats that you might come across or that you might need to give permission for. So obviously there's the electronic, digital, and audio. So that means things like ebooks or audiobooks. That's one format that you can license your work in. Print, which normally includes books and magazines. That's probably going to be the most common for most of you as writers. There's also things like websites and social media. So if a person wants to, I don't know, say use an image that you created, or if they want to license your artwork for the promotion of their website and for their social media pages, that's something that they have to license from you. They shouldn't be using your artwork without your permission in any kind of space. But websites and social media are, one of those things that you really have to kind of look out for nowadays. Broadcast, that's like any form of broadcast, whether it be through the TV, video, radio, any kind of portion of you performing your work. If a person wants to use that to promote their business or to promote their services, your performance, they need to license your performance. And if they want to use your work in any kind of marketing material, whether that be, like a brochure or a postcard, again, the web, if it's for like an ad that they're running on their website or on Facebook, something like that, they need to pay you for licensing your work for marketing use. And trade shows, that might not be something that you think of, but, if it's a technical trade show and your artwork, fits that particular, field, like say education, and somebody wants to use part of your writing as part of their display at a table at a trade show, then that's something that they also need to license your artwork for. There's some terms that a licensing agreement will set. These are the main ones. These are the big ones, right? So the time period. How long do they have your permission to use your artwork? It can be any amount of time that you set. Once that time is up, the license expires and they can no longer use it. So you want to always be aware of, your time periods, the dates of when licenses expire, because that means that for you, you might be able to either renegotiate your contract, maybe get a higher amount of royalty, or another lump sum. It might also mean that you could finally use that artwork in a way that you haven't used it before. The same goes for royalty rates and the payment schedule. That's something that is really, really important that you set up when you create your licensing agreement. So, it could be a 25% royalty rate. It could be a 50% royalty rate. Those are common ones, 30% royalties. Some of them are based on the number of items that are sold. Some of them are based on, the sale of items minus the expenses that the business takes on to print or to publish. So, your royalty rate, that's something that you really want to make sure that you negotiate well, and also how often you get paid. Some contracts might be, paid once a year. Some of them might be paid quarterly, every 3 months. Some of them could even be every month. That all depends on how you set up your negotiated rates. And then I think one of the things that I wasn't able to fit on here, but another thing that you want to also think about is, you know, an exit clause. You know, when and how is it possible for you to terminate your agreement with someone because you don't like what they're doing with your work? You know, if you think that that's really important, that's also something that you should really consider when setting up a licensing agreement. You know, because you never know, right? Leadership at a company might change, and they might start using your artwork in a way that you don't like, that goes against your ideals. So, you know, you always have an exit clause somewhere in your contracts that you're able to use as you see fit. So, does anyone have any questions about that? Any concerns or comments, even? Kathy?
I was just thinking, with everything that you said, it's very formalized, and is there a lot of money when you go these routes? Is there money available? Do people make it?
It's possible. I mean, it may not be something that you get to do right away. You know, being realistic, it's a very competitive world as an artist, and so, you know, you may have a combination of a job, you know, a teaching artist gig, and also, you know, some commissions and sales and artist contracts that you have to develop. But, you know, just like with any job, once you kind of pay your dues, you know, you start to get a rep for being a particular kind of artist. You know, you might start to see, you know, enough to make a living. You know, most artists, we probably, you know, I mean, speaking for myself, I never honestly thought that I would be very rich, you know, but thanks to all of the work that I've put in, you know, I've been able to at least feed myself and clothe myself, you know, and that to me is enough, right? Like,
Yeah.
Success is very relative, but you know, and at any time, it's really more about protecting yourself and protecting your artwork, your intellectual property, because that's something that a person could take away from you and manipulate or use in a way that you don't agree with, or may benefit from it, and you could never see a dime. So, so artist contracts are really important, and I do recommend that you use them, no matter how much money you're being commissioned for.
Right, understood. That's the whole purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you know, you don't want to ever do work for free, and you don't ever want to also, you know, give people the opportunity to make money off your back, essentially. At least without paying you what you're owed. Does anyone else have any questions? Concerns? All right. I have one last handout that I'll be adding, and this is kind of like an extra one for you guys to consider when looking at ways to market yourselves. Everybody in the world is ultimately using social media in one way or another. And just today, just before I actually completed the preparing for this workshop, this organization called Creative Capital, I strongly recommend that you check them out and that you follow them on social media and also sign up for their newsletter. They sent out this document called Social Media Best Practices for Artists. I gave it a quick little review, and it's a pretty informative little booklet. It's, I think, like 27 pages or something like that. So if you wanted to print it out, it is gonna take up a decent amount of paper. But if you have it as a PDF, even better. It gives you some information and things to consider when using things like email marketing. You know, I use MailChimp as the email marketing service for DSTL Arts. DSTL Arts also, you know, is on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And each one, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, each one has a different purpose. But each one of them, when used together, can really help you promote your artwork and help you promote yourself as an individual artist. These are ways in which you can get donations. These are ways in which you can get commissions. And these are things that funders actually look at. Recently, the California Arts Council had their artist fellowship program, which is something they haven't had in over 25 years, I think. And, one of the things that they requested was a website and also, your social media handles to see if you're an active artist. And so, these are some very useful things that are really good for you to know when it comes time to use Twitter, for example, which is like the bread and butter, really, when it comes to social media for a writer. If you're not on Twitter and you're a writer, you're missing out a lot. Facebook is one of those things that, love it or hate it, it's there, and it's something that does help people actually promote events, and it helps them promote workshops, and it helps them gain, a following. So, same thing with Instagram. These actually have, almost all of them have integrations with things like Square. So you can actually sell using MailChimp. You can sell your artwork using MailChimp. You can sell through Instagram and through Facebook. And Twitter automatically converts now URLs that are for web stores into clickable links that people can actually purchase artwork through, or whatever the product is. So I'll be uploading this handout, this little booklet, to Google Classroom for all of you to have access to as well. But again, I strongly recommend that you follow Creative Capital and sign up for their newsletter, because they do offer great workshops, opportunities for applying to artist residencies, and also grants. So a lot of the stuff that I talked about today, they also have those similar resources for you to look at. So that's it. That's all I got for you all today. Again, any questions, any other feedback? I'm glad that you're finding this informative. I know all of you here are excellent authors, writers, poets. Some of you have had the privilege of publishing through the mentorship program. The rest of you, I have the privilege of publishing you through Conchas y Café. Again, if you have any questions in the future, I'm always happy to try and help you out. Y'all can email me. Google Classroom will be up at least for a few more weeks. So if you guys have questions, you can always post them on Google Classroom for anybody that missed today's session. And yeah, that's basically it.
Do we have one more workshop class, Luis, or this is the last one?
Next week, I'll have another workshop session for you guys. Actually, I don't really have an idea of what I'm gonna cover, but if you have a specific topic that you can think of right now, I'm more than happy to look into that and try and create some handouts for you. As it is already, all of these sessions where I cover these kinds of things, they are up on YouTube now. So, you can go to YouTube and find, through the previous Conchas y Café series, lessons on how to create a project budget, how to, develop a business plan. There's also, I think, a lesson on different formats of, self-publishing, whether that be through zines or other services. And I think I have another one that gives you a list of resources for, doing like print on demand work, tote bags, that kind of thing. Tina, David, you guys have a question?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about the workshops that are coming up?
The next workshop that I have actually is next Monday. If you guys want to join in, that's through the LA Public Library, the Baldwin Hills branch. I'm doing a series with them on like self-care, the art of self-care. So I'll be doing a 1-hour workshop next Monday at 7 p.m. On stream of consciousness, how to write stream of consciousness. So you'll have to actually sign up through the library's website. So I don't have the link for that, but you should have received the newsletter from this last month from DSTL Arts, and that actually has the link for you to be able to sign up for these workshops. They're not in person; they're virtual. They're done through Zoom, not through Google Meet. So you'll have to definitely sign up through them so that you can get the Zoom link. Let me see. I think I can show you all the flyer. I have to actually pull it up though. Either way, the flyer that I have doesn't have the URL for signing up. So, but it is next Monday at 7 p.m. I can tell you that, and you'll want to go to the Baldwin Hills Library social media pages, whether that be on their Facebook, their Instagram, or I think their Twitter as well. They should have it there. I'll upload it to Google Classroom as well, so you guys can see the flyer at least. And I think that's the last workshop that I'll be teaching for this upcoming month.
Luis, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I find it faster to talk than to write it down.
Yeah.
Everything that we've done, like since the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
you archive that, or what do you do? Because I know you've had, very good video. What is it called? Recordings that I like to go back to and look at. Do you still have them, or
Mm-hmm.
the class stuff is gone, or what?
All the stuff that's up on YouTube is going to stay up on YouTube, so you can see the recordings there. The handouts themselves, I keep them as a digital copy, and as long as you're downloading them off of Google Classroom, I hope you still have them. If at some point you lose it, or if you need it again, I'm always happy to email it to you.
Okay.
But yeah.
I got the, like, for the past two.
Mm-hmm.
Usually I print them.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, I told you I have everything all over the place. And
yeah.
trying to get organized, and we move the stuff in the furniture in the living room.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just okay. So you must have all this stuff. Okay.
Cool.
All right. Thank you, Luis.
Yeah, no problem. And as far as other workshops that will be happening over the summer, I'm actually, as Karen is suggesting, I'm actually going to start having Mauricio and Caro help me over the summer to begin piloting the new version of the arts mentorship program. So the Poet Artist Development Program is what I'm calling it now. And so they're going to be helping me plan and teach some workshops.
Are those going to be, I'm sorry that I keep asking,
Mm-hmm.
online, in person?
Yeah, they'll probably be virtual for now. But that's something that I probably won't have them do until maybe like June.
Okay.
So, because I'll need to train them and make sure that they're prepared. But yeah.
And of course, this information, we'll find it on the DSTL Arts
Mm-hmm.
website? Is that where you will put it?
Yeah, I'll be updating the DSTL Arts website over the summer. And I'll also be actually working with Jeremy and Tanya to continue updating our social media as well.
Like Facebook. You're on Facebook, right?
Yeah, we have a Facebook. There's also the newsletter too. So
I don't even know.
I think most of you are getting the newsletter by email.
I don't know if I do get you. Well, I'll look into it.
Yeah,
So I go into the website and sign up or for the newsletter, right?
Yeah, you can sign up through the website as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I want to stay informed over the summer.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
The more ways you're connected, the better.
Definitely.
All right. So, if there are no more questions, then we'll call it a night.
Thanks, Luis.
Thanks, Luis.
No
Have a good
problem.
evening. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. I'll see you next
very
week.
much.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Luis. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Everybody. Thank you, Luis. Thank you.